You know, if you ever read a traditional business school textbook, you've probably noticed how they paint this absolutely perfect picture of management. They hand you clear steps, audacious goals, and tidy little frameworks. But here is the brutal, honest truth, perfectly captured in this opening quote. Traditional recipes completely fail when everything in your company goes wrong. There is simply no formula for what to do when your business is rapidly falling apart. Put yourself in the shoes of a CEO for a second. Imagine the crushing, almost suffocating psychological pressure when your market completely collapses, your customers just disappear, and your employees are staring at you, desperately looking for answers that you simply do not have. So, how do leaders actually survive when the recipes fail and the business is dying? Well, that dark, gritty reality, that is exactly what Ben Horowitz unpacks in his unvarnished survival guide, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. We're not talking about the fun, glamorous parts of entrepreneurship here. Horowitz introduces us to a terrifying, chaotic phase he calls the struggle. It's this absolute crucible where your logic and your emotions violently clash, and honestly, where you can't even ask for help without showing weakness. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a bit of a descent into the underworld. We are going to reconstruct the structural, operational, and psychological frameworks developed by Horowitz. Consider this your tactical survival playbook for navigating the darkest, grittiest realities of crisis leadership. Here's the roadmap for our journey today. We'll start with Welcome to the Struggle, then look at the loud cloud crucible, compare peacetime versus wartime leadership, tackle navigating hard people decisions, programming company culture, and wrap up with the ultimate rule, don't quit. All right, let's jump right into part 2, the loud cloud crucible, surviving near-death business experiences. Just think about the sheer velocity of these existential threats. I mean, wow. Back in 2001, LoudCloud's entire customer base evaporated with the dot-com crash. To survive, they literally had to execute what the press called the IPO from hell at just $6 a share. When that wasn't enough, they pulled off a radical, totally secret pivot in 2002, selling off their core hosting business to EDS to focus entirely on their internal software, Opsware. Imagine the stress of secretly assigning 10 engineers to separate out your code, knowing that if word leaked, your company would instantly fold. By 2004, facing a 60-day ultimatum from EDS that would have bankrupted them, they boldly acquired a company called Tangram at a massive premium just to save the contract. And miraculously, by 2007, this constant, relentless tactical maneuvering led to a $1.65 billion all-cash exit to Hewlett-Packard. Moving on to part 3, peacetime versus wartime leadership, shattering traditional management rules. You absolutely have to know what kind of environment you're operating in. Because honestly, what makes you an amazing leader in peacetime could literally kill your company in a crisis. Peacetime is all about consensus, broad career development, and polite diplomatic communication. But look at wartime. When your company is staring down an imminent existential threat, you do not have time for consensus. You have a single, fleeting opportunity to survive. The executive has to centralize authority, demand direct execution, and accept absolute, unshared responsibility for the outcome. You shift from structured and polite to highly urgent, even utilizing purposeful profanity to cut right through the noise. Part 4. Navigating hard people decisions. Executing the toughest parts of the job. Applying cold, calculated logic during a crisis is almost never harder than when you're conducting layoffs. Executing layoffs requires a very strict 4-step process. First, get your head right. The company failed its plan. This isn't just about individual performance, it's on the company. Second, do not delay the execution. Leaks just cause absolute chaos. Third, and this is absolutely the golden rule, train your managers to lay off their own people. You cannot outsource this to HR. Leaders must stand tall and face the people who worked so hard for them. Finally, address the whole company. Why? Because you are doing this to preserve the trust of the people who are staying. Believe me, they are watching exactly how you treat their colleagues on the way out the door. Now, firing an executive, that is equally agonizing, but it takes a very specific approach. The crucial point here is the root cause analysis. As the CEO, you have to swallow your pride and accept that it is your fault. You hired for the wrong criteria, or maybe you hired for scale way too soon. You must frame it as a failure of your own interview and integration system, not just a personal failure of the executive. When you sit down for the conversation, you use decisive language. You do not say, I think, you say, I have decided. And you follow it up immediately with extremely fast communication to the rest of the company so the narrative doesn't spiral out of control. So what happens if you dodge these brutal choices? Well, you start racking up what Horowitz calls management debt. It's kind of like technical debt, but for human resources. A classic example is putting two in the box, appointing two co-leaders to run a single department, just because you want to avoid making a difficult choice between them. Sure, in the short term, it avoids conflict, but in the long term, it dilutes accountability, confuses your team, and carries massive, massive operational costs. And when that management debt piles up, things get structurally broken in your company. Take the Peter principle. It's crazy how common this is. People do a great job, so you promote them. They do great again, you promote them again. Eventually, they get promoted into a job they are just terrible at, and there they stay. They slowly cripple your organization because you lack the structured feedback processes to either correct them or move them out. Oh, and the pathology gets even worse. Have you heard of the law of crappy people? It dictates that talent on any given title level will eventually converge down to the crappiest person with that title. Why does that happen? Because humans measure performance relative to their peers. A single low-performing manager sets a brand new, much lower standard for all subsequent hires in that entire department. This perfectly illustrates the urgent, absolute need for strict performance management and really high talent density. Which brings us to part 5. Programming company culture, shock therapy, and lead bullets. Let's talk about operational shock therapy. Take Jeff Bezos in the early days of Amazon. He didn't just write the word frugality on some whiteboard in the break room. No, he went out and bought cheap wooden doors from Home Depot, literally nailed legs to them, and made them the official company desks. When a shocked new employee asked why they were working on a literal door, the answer was immediately clear. We look for every single opportunity to save money so we can deliver lower costs to our customers. That is how you program culture through shock value. It's provocative, it's weird, but man, it changes daily behavior. But hey, culture isn't just about makeshift desks. It's heavily defined by who you tolerate. You're inevitably going to run into brilliant, high-performing employees who are just incredibly toxic. You've got the heretic, who points out flaws just to build their own personal agenda, the flake, who is totally brilliant but completely unreliable, and the jerk, who just alienates the entire team and cripples communication. Horowitz actually references legendary football coach John Madden's rule here. You can only hold the bus for someone if they are undeniably exceptionally critical to your survival. If not, that bad behavior will rot your culture right from the inside out. This kind of intense cultural discipline bleeds right into how you build your product. In a crisis where your competitor is basically eating your lunch, executives love to hunt for silver bullets. An easy partnership, a clever marketing trick, a quick fix. But here is the crucial reality check. Silver bullets do not exist when your product is fundamentally inferior. You only have lead bullets. Lead bullets are the unglamorous, agonizing, 7-day-a-week, absolutely grueling engineering work required to actually build a superior product. And why are those lead bullets so crucial? It comes down to this concept, 10x. To actually steal meaningful market share from an established competitor, your startup's product cannot just be a little bit better. Because of switching costs and vendor inertia, your product must be at least 10 times better than whatever the prevailing alternative is. If you don't hit that 10x threshold, absolutely no amount of brilliant marketing or fun cultural perks will save you from going under. Finally, part 6, the ultimate rule, don't quit. This is all about managing your own mind. The psychological weight of a failing startup, it can completely warp your thinking. A lot of executives fall into this positivity trap, hiding bad news just to protect team morale. But you cannot put it all on your own shoulders. You must treat bad news as an urgent operational priority. Horowitz compares a healthy company to a low-latency network where bad news travels instantly, allowing the collective brainpower of the whole company to jump in and solve it. Focus on the road, where you actually want to go, not the wall you're terrified of hitting. And when the anxiety is just too much, physically write the problems down on paper to separate them from your raging emotions. If you go and ask the greatest, most battle-tested CEOs how they actually survived their absolute darkest days, they rarely point to some genius strategic pivot. Instead, they give this remarkably consistent, profoundly simple answer. I didn't quit. Great CEOs face the pain. They just do. They endure the sleepless nights, the cold sweats, and that profound, crushing isolation. The courage bar for building a truly great company is as incredibly high today as it has ever been. Sure, intelligence is required, but courage is what actually determines your survival. Which leaves us right here with this final thought. In business, you're constantly forced to choose between doing what is popular, easy, and wrong, versus doing what is lonely, difficult, and right. Every single time you make that hard, correct decision, you become just a little more courageous. So I leave you with this question to chew on. When you finally find yourself in the depths of the struggle, will you do what's popular, or will you have the courage to do what's right? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.